And I think that depending on the spirit that you're of, depending on what you value and what you're looking for, you can find evidence that life is not fair in that it's bent against you, that you are set up for failure, that things are difficult and hard and painful and frustrating and everything can go wrong. You can find proof or evidence for all of that. I would propose that's actually a delusion. The other side of this is you could find proof and evidence that life, in fact, is absolutely bent in your favor, that all the things going on around you are actually there to help increase your party and make you more successful and drive your pleasure and enjoyment deeper than you're capable of finding by yourself. And that is the world that we live in. That's the state of reality and creation that we're existing in. All this is designed to make your life amazing. Our dad put together a playground with drama and story and characters and elements for our pleasure, for our delight, not for our struggle and suffering. Now, keep in mind, obviously there's an adversary. There's a creature, a character running around trying to ruin our lives. That's true. But the crazy thing is that guy doesn't have any power to do it. He can't ruin our lives by himself. He needs to trick us, manipulate us, deceive us, convince us that his version of reality is true so that we will dismantle our lives from the inside out. Because we're the only ones with the power to dismantle our lives. It comes from us, okay? So life is not set up in a way where you have to work hard and get after something or overcome something in order to succeed. Life is set up that you actually have to work to sabotage it. I'm gonna let that sit for a second because I know that probably a lot of beliefs and mindsets, it's not our experience. But the reality is, if you weren't trained on how to deviate from God, it's actually one of the most natural things in the world for a believer to agree with him and experience abundant life. It's the most normal thing in the world. Now, depending on what you're taught, what you believe, what your mind has grabbed hold of, that is going to inform how you experience all of this and the results that come from that. But the reality is, what we ought to start with is that life is not fair. You are overwhelmingly set up to succeed. Okay, now if you think about this, let's pretend like we swapped roles with Satan. Pretend you were the devil, right? Pretend that was your job to be him, and life was about how you could sabotage the saints and destroy humanity. Depending on the spirit you're of, that perspective might make you think, well, man, that'd be easy for me. I could easily destroy and ruin people's lives. The world is already going to hell in a handbasket, so like you're handing me like a cooked turkey, right? Some people might think that way. But if you're in connection to the Lord, aware of who he is and what he's doing, and then you're given the role of Satan, I mean, that's where life very much is not fair. You're screwed. You don't get to win. I mean, literally from the get-go, you already know the end you've lost. Right? Good luck. And then with all these people, they have all these things already innately intact in their person that are designed to overcome you, to resist you, to be immune to you. And your job is to trick them, and basically what you have to do is become a master manipulator and get them to be uninformed, disconnected, blind to what's already true, and consistently work to shove them toward a path that would destroy them. Now, if you were Satan, life's absolutely not fair in the other direction, right? You are set up for failure. Did I see that we have a question already? Okay, we've got a question. Let's go ahead and pop it on.
Okay, this is from Charlie. He says, okay, what if you have such ingrained ideas about certain things being wrong, like from Catholic school, for example? How do you tell whether that prohibition is from the Lord and not simply being extensively trained into? One thing that came to mind is you talked about meeting with a woman. I know Christians who would never meet, even for coffee in a public place, with someone of the opposite sex.
Okay. Okay. They did not hear it? Sorry, we're just checking to see if you guys can hear the question or not. Ruby just read the whole question. Do it again. Yeah, do it again. Let's make sure they can hear it. Can you guys hear this? Go ahead.
Okay, from Charlie. Okay,
what if you have such ingrained ideas about certain things being wrong, like from Catholic school, for example? How do you tell whether that prohibition is from the Lord and not simply being extensively trained into? One thing that came to mind is you talked about meeting with a woman. I know Christians who would never meet, even for coffee, in a public place with someone of the opposite sex.
Yep, so at the end of the day, this really boils down to what's leading your life. Are you governing your life based on rules you were taught, external motivations or pressures, and what people are going to think about you? Or are you governing your life according to the spirit that's coming up from inside of you? So Charlie, I'm going to ask you this question. If we put away everyone's opinions and you followed the spirit of the Lord in your life, is God afraid of you meeting with a woman one-to-one? That's a rhetorical question. Of course he's not. God's not afraid of that, right? I understand historically in Christian circles we've wanted to minimize that kind of interaction, but I'd like to propose the reason we did that is a reaction to fear rather than setting people up for success. We're trying to mitigate or limit the possibility of failure or sin or whatever, right? And so that value is actually built on a reaction to dysfunction. And we've built it into our value system of how we're going to go about navigating success in our lives. The source of that is already problematic. So it can't lead us to freedom when it's already preparing in advance for failure, right? I understand restriction and prohibition, as you said, Charlie, but the motive behind it, the reason why we withhold must be because of love, because of the Holy Spirit, not be because of what people think, because of fear, because of control, right? So am I saying that you should always meet with women or the opposite sex all the time, constantly? No, I'm saying you should follow the Lord. And it doesn't matter what their gender is. You might not want to meet with somebody because the Lord's not meeting with them, rather than what kind of body parts they have, right? Like we want to be motivated by what's coming up from the inside rather than external pressure or perception or expectations of us. We want to graduate from trying to appeal to what people think and start living from what the Lord is asking of us from the inside, okay? We ought to obey the Lord rather than men. And so if you don't go to have coffee with this person because you're afraid of what people think, I would propose it's sin for you not to go. You know what I mean? And it's not about like having a different perspective. It's about what are you governed by? Are you still in the training wheels because you refuse to grow, or is it because you're afraid of what people think, which the Lord expects for you to let go of, right? And so I think the question, Ruby, the overall question was, how do you change this? Is that right?
Yeah, he said one thing that came to mind.
What was it before that?
How do you tell whether that prohibition is from the Lord?
Yeah, so the Bible instructs us, Charlie, answering the how do you tell? The Bible instructs us to test every spirit, right? Whether it's from the Lord or not. And the authors expect that you have some grid for that. And some of us have been so educated to a point where we actually don't believe it's possible to know what God's saying about a thing. We can't know what God wants. And I would say that very idea, that belief is coming from hell. It's not true. The Bible actually treats believers with an expectation that you know, right? Through constant practice, having our powers of discernment exercised so we can know the difference between good and evil and know the will of the Lord. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. So not his law, his intent, his desire. What is he after, right? We are expected to know that stuff, not out of a requirement, but out of a maturity. This should be coming from the like symptom of connection to the Lord, right? So we get to a place where we recognize this is what God is doing. This is what he's saying. I can tell because I've learned to test the spirit of a thing. You know if a tree is good or bad based on the fruit that it produces. We're going to talk about fruit tomorrow, y'all. Fruit, right? Fruit comes from nature. It comes from source. Like an apple tree is going to produce apples. A banana tree is going to produce bananas, right? An evil tree produces sin. A good tree produces righteousness. It's not about a perception or perspective here. Obviously that comes into play somewhere along the way. But before our perception matters, we're looking at what is this made out of? Where is it coming from? Is me meeting with this person coming from love or lust? Am I trying to get coffee with this person because I'm trying to like get all up in that and be part of the adultery that I was talking about? Or am I doing this because of a value and desire for connection with this relationship that is pure? Is it possible for a male to have a relationship with a female who's not their spouse, who's married to someone else, and there be purity in the connection? Is that possible? Yeah. It's normal. I would like to propose that's normal. When we continue to expect that men are going to be slaves to their, sexual appetites and they can't handle themselves, therefore they have to limit their interaction, I think we're actually paying tribute to the potential for failure rather than assuming that the Holy Spirit is able to lead us and keep us, right? So we want to build structure and values around faith and belief in who God is and what he's doing. And I'm not saying we should set a standard for this. I'm saying that's where we want to connect with the Lord in and let him lead us. And then, hopefully we're establishing like structure and culture based on the faith side of this rather than the fear side. Am I saying just be flippant and careless and send someone to coffee with someone who, doesn't have control of themselves? No, we want to pay attention to some of those exceptions. That shouldn't be the rule for everybody. You know what I mean? It should be that we follow the Holy Spirit and we pursue what he's doing in us, as us, through us. Charlie, did I answer your question? We'll keep paying attention. All right. So life is not fair, y'all. Satan is screwed over. He has failed from the beginning. He doesn't get to win. How can you imagine being set on a journey and knowing you don't get to win? You're going to fail. You'll never arrive, but do it anyway. That's his life. That's what he gets to walk out. That's his lot. How fair is that? It's not fair. And I think some of us get deluded into thinking, wow, Satan's so powerful, and God, look at the chaos and the depravity and all the blah, blah, blah. And you're getting obsessed with those details, and it's only building a facade in your head. This world is not going to Satan. This world is going to God. And if that's messing with your theology, you've got some pretty bad theology. It's pretty unbiblical. What we see in the book is the kingdoms of this world will become the kingdoms of our God. The knowledge of the glory of the Lord covers the earth as the waters cover the sea. What? Creation is groaning for the revealing of the sons and daughters of God. Like, this place is not getting worse. It is going to be redeemed. It is going to reflect the nature of the King. That is going to happen. So if you think that it's supposed to get worse, it simply just means that you're informed by the wrong side of everything. Life is not fair. Satan's life sucks. You are absolutely set up for success. Okay, so we're going to look at that today. I want to set a basic plumb line for all of us. I teach this in the online coaching group with the people training to become coaches, specifically in the spiritual arena. There's a plumb line we want to hold everyone to as a standard to help triangulate and recognize where deviance happens from original design, right? God has set all of us up for success, and anything that disagrees with that, we are going to address. And we're using ICE thesis from a basics discernment to be able to recognize that. So discernment there are two words for discernment in the New Testament in the Greek. Aesthesis is natural cognitive reasoning, right? Discernment, judgment, being able to tell the difference between stuff. Gravity, speed, hot, cold, whatever. Like, we're able to judge, right? We can perceive from patterns, from like comparing and contrasting, from statistics. Our moral compass is coming from this place, right? Like our five senses, that's all aesthesis. Diakrisis, the supernatural form of diakrisis, which is judgment, is a supernatural ability to perceive source in the spirit. Where is something coming from? What is its nature? What is it trying to do, right? These are different forms of discernment. This is one that we can all engage and practice no matter what our gifting is. And so I want to set a plumb line for all of us, for you as yourself, but then also for anybody that you're in a relationship with. A born-again believer has all this intact. I mean, let's just stick with the born-again believer piece. Anybody who's been born again has all these things going into play. We're going to look at the anatomy of what it means to be a prosperous being, okay? Did God set us up for success or not? Okay, so I'm going to lay out a body spreadsheet. This is a human body, right? We're recognizing the human form, right? And we're going to look at some body parts on this person to denote the prosperity that God has already naturally built into us, okay? So for starters, every person has a voice. The presence of a voice in your life is empowerment. It is opportunity for you. Marcus, this laptop's going to die. Opportunity for you to have power and to be able to participate and influence the world you live in. Okay? Mark 11:23. If anyone, and I'm going to give you one scripture per body part we're going to look at. Body part. And keep in mind, there are many verses for each of these things I'm about to talk about. I'm just going to give you an example just to give you some grounding in scripture. If anyone says to this mountain, go, throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Many of us think that our voice is here for us to be able to communicate with other people, right? We use our voice to speak English or whatever language and to convey ideas and pass that information along to each other, right? And obviously that is a function, it does happen. I would like to propose, though, that your voice is not primarily supposed to be used for communication to other people. It's probably 2 years ago now, I lost my voice. Oh, that's good, thank you. I lost it for 8 months. It was a nightmare. I couldn't speak. And I stopped being able to be around people. I just stopped going places. I basically became a recluse or hermit at my house, and my vitality just continued to diminish. And I got depressed at one point. It just got really, I couldn't see my future anymore. Like, I stopped having a connection to things that I related to hope, right? And so with our voices, we do communicate, but more importantly than this, you guys, your voice gives you the power to affect reality, to affect creation, to affect nature. Your voice is meant to shape and to change what you're experiencing around you. With your mouth, you actually get to set the course of your life, not as a deviation from what God is doing, but as an agreement. With your voice, you get to cast your lot with what the Lord is doing in you and through you, for you, because of you, right? A great example of this is, of the significance and value of this, is when we look at The Little Mermaid. Those of you who have taken the Discerning Spirits course, you know, like, or maybe that's on the online course. When I teach this class live, I use the example of The Little Mermaid. I think I don't put it in the course because copyright issues or whatever, but if you haven't seen The Little Mermaid, you're not gonna get this, but if you have, Ariel is obsessed with this human prince. He's got legs, right? And she wants to be with Eric. And so she wants to be a human, just like everyone else, so she can walk around and be like them, and more importantly, fall in love with this dude. Fall more in love with this dude. And her dad hates humans. He's super offended and prejudiced against them and destroys all of her human stuff, and she's heartbroken. And so she's led to the sea witch, Ursula, right? She goes to Ursula and she's like, hey, I hear you can give me legs. And she's like, oh girl, I can give you legs. Does a spell. She's like, here's the deal though. You can't get something for nothing, right? What I want from you is your voice. She's like, my voice? What, how am I gonna, she's like, you've got all this other stuff to work with, to communicate, right? But I want your voice. And so Ariel sings in the middle of the spell, and her voice gets extracted from her person and put into a shell, and she can't talk anymore, but she gets legs and she goes to the human world, right? That is such a graphic, intense scene, especially for a kid's movie, of evil coming in and stealing power from someone who's supposed to be bearing the image of God, right? Taking away her authority, her power to influence reality, removing it from her person. That is violating in so many ways. It's awful. The enemy is very much after our voice. He's working pretty hard to try and make this his role function, right? If he can take your voice away.
We're getting some audio problems, so.
Okay, so should I just turn this off?
Yeah, she's trying to.
Okay, and I'm not gonna hold the bottom of this microphone. Sorry guys. Okay, so I'm using this mic. If the enemy can get you to turn your voice off or take your voice away, or get you to use your voice for all manner of dysfunction and worthless things, then you actually veto or abdicate your power to influence the world in whatever way that you would want to, right? Your voice gives you a say. It gives you a vote. It legitimately gives you the ability to shape the world you live in. I'm not saying that figuratively or metaphorically. I'm saying literally. When you speak, you are creating with God. So when you continue to confess with your mouth that you're broke, that you're sick, that you're tired, that you're lonely, understand that your voice reverberating that frequency of loneliness or poverty or whatever you're talking about is only enforcing that experience in your life. It is only supporting that experience. It's creating the deficit. You are not left poor or sick or lonely, rejected, unloved. That's not true. Your dad is good and kind, and he loves you, and he has demonstrated himself. He has represented himself, and he continues to do so. And through our delusion and then our agreement, we continue to confess a deviation from the truth. Depravity, darkness, betrayal from the sovereign realm, if you will, right? So your voice is not just for communicating to people. It is for communicating to the universe. Thank you. And with that, you make your way, right? And so we know James talks about the tongue being like a rudder, like a little fire in a forest, right? It's powerful, and it directs the course of your life. If you can't gain control of your tongue and you're just running amok, your religion is worthless. Who cares what you're doing for God? If your mouth is out of control, clearly you are out of control. Clearly you are not governed by a loving being. Clearly you are rampant and subject to something else, okay? So every single one of us has a voice. Every single one of us has the ability to vote, to say yes or no, to affirm or oppose stuff. When we say amen when we pray, that's translated to let it be so. Why do we say let it be so after someone prays? We are casting our vote, combining our authority with what they said and saying this is good, this is true, we want this to happen. We're saying this is good, right? When I'm saying something here that you're like, oh, that was really good, and you're compelled, like, that's so good. Why do you have to say that? Because you're just having an experience? No, because there's some party that understands when you vocalize something, you're approving of it. You're putting your seal. You're agreeing. You're adding momentum or weight or power to it, right? And so we're like, yes. Or when someone says to me, and you're like, oh, that's true. Why are we saying that? We're recognizing source. This thing exists in the sovereign realm. This came from the light. That's true. And with our voice, we affirm it. With our voice, we endorse it. With our voice, we agree. Okay, so your voice is not just to express yourself or to communicate to other people. Your voice is to wield power in your life. That's what it's for, and you have it. This is one of the things you've just been built in. You came with to be able to be powerful here. This makes life not fair. You have an advantage over Satan. You get to say whatever you want, and when you speak, stuff happens. Okay? Let's look at what else we've got. You have a name. Every person has a name. Isaiah 43, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. What does this mean? I mean, listen, let's talk about names for a second. My name is Mike. It's not Michael. It's Mike. Why? Because this is the explanation I got. My dad is Japanese. My mom is American. I was told my name was Mike because Japanese people don't know how to pronounce Michael. Or like it's difficult. They would say Maikeru. It's like a lot of. So instead, they say Maiku. Mike is my name. On my birth certificate, it's just Mike. Some people call me Michael or ask if I go by Michael or Mike. It's just Mike. That's my name, okay? We all have a name. We've got funny ideas and opinions about our names. Where did our name come from? What does it mean? Why did our parents name us this? What were we going to be if we were a different gender? Like, Ian, what was your name going to be if you were a girl? You guys, Ian is running the live stream of all this right now, so thanks, Ian. If he was going to be a girl, his name was going to be Bonita. Thankfully, Ian was born a boy, so his name is Ian. No offense if your name is Bonita or you have a family member named Bonita, but just it's hard to imagine. Anyway, if your name was Bonita, you probably wouldn't be here today. That's probably true. Anyway, we all have names, right? It's funny, it's cultural, it's whatever, but at the end of the day, what the name you possess denotes is uniqueness, identity, individuality, right? And a recognition of worth that you possess regardless of anything else in your life. Your name carries identity. It speaks to who you are. And regardless of what your name means, it also the fact that you have one means you have a place in this world. It means you have been recognized. You have been acknowledged. You are a being. You're a person. You are endowed with inalienable rights, right? With dignity and worth and value. You have a name, okay? This thing continues itself to defend your very existence. It advocates and promotes your well-being. Whether you mean for that to happen or not, whether you're aware of it or not, it's intact. It's built into the mechanism. Your identity carries with it fortitude, okay? And so when you think about looking at life and chaos and destruction, all the ways things can go wrong, it's easy to forget just the very fundamental foundation from which your existence is coming from with all of these things intact. Your name is part of that package. It makes you special and important. We see like your name gets written in a book at some point, the Lamb's Book of Life, right? It cannot be blotted out. It says that God's going to give you a white stone with your name engraved on it that only you will know. The idea of having a name is incredibly profound. It is significant, and you were born with it. Who taught you get to have a name? Who said? Who fought for that? None of us had to do that, right? It was given to us. We are set up for success, okay? Names matter, and you have one. Count yourself blessed in the cosmos of all the things going on in that dark peripheral ether. What? You've been chosen. You've been identified. You've been given value standing on your own. That matters. Okay. What else we got? We've got a stance, you guys. So I'm putting at the leg, right? You have the ability to stand. Ephesians 6. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you've done everything, to stand. We see scripture where God has pulled us out of the miry clay, set our feet upon a rock, right? And we know him, and we operate from that place. Building on sand versus building on the rock. We have been given a stance. When you've been born again, chosen by the Lord, you have standing, you have footing, you have a place to be grounded, to rise, if you will, okay? And that stance is empowerment. That stance gives you the ability to be unmoved by other things. So I'm talking about just your ability to stand. Like, it's easy to forget that this isn't true for everybody. Like, a cat doesn't have the ability to stand like we do. I don't mean erect or upright or Homo erectus or whatever. I'm not talking about anatomy. I'm talking about in the spirit, a cat, a dog, a monkey, they don't have the ability to stand on anything like you do. They don't have the ability to create. They don't have a unique identity in this story. They also don't have the ability to stand for something and be unmoved. They are rooted in their appetites. They are slaves to their impulses and instincts, right? You are different than this. You have footing and a foundation, and you have a will to get to make a choice and to be represented or to represent yourself. And in that is strength, is power, is empowerment, okay? And so when you come across an issue, whether there's injustice or something that should happen, maybe there's a celebration that should take place, the choice and the effort to go about pursuing the restoration of something, the opposition of something, the celebration, whatever it might be, you have the ability to pursue that thing and make it so, right? And that's a stance you get to take. A few years ago, when I walked away from having a job and I just became self-employed and as an entrepreneur, I threw a retirement party. I had to celebrate. I had to commemorate this moment in my life where I was moving from something to something else. It was a big deal, right? So I had a party and invited friends and we celebrated and all that. Why? Because I needed attention? Because I was bored? No, I was taking a stand. This needed to be commemorated, at least as far as I was concerned, right? There was something in me that recognized, like, this is significant and this matters, and even if no one else notices or recognizes it, it doesn't matter. I see it. This is important, and so therefore I will take a stand here, and I will recognize this. I will acknowledge it. And from that place, I got to say something to the world. And here's the thing, you guys. The world, I'm not talking about like this from a new age perspective, so please don't put me in that category. The universe, the cosmos, existence, this world we live in is watching us. It is not a passive, indifferent world. This world is favorably and affectionately inclined toward us, okay? And it's watching. So when we take a stand, when we make a statement, when we stand on something and demonstrate it to whatever degree, the universe is watching us and is taking note, is being impacted, is learning something. Angels are watching us and our interactions with God, and they're like peculiar. They're fascinated. They're mesmerized. Like, what is happening here? What is going on? What's the deal with these like peachy, fuzzy creatures? And what is the master doing with them? Like, they're confounded. Principalities, powers. We are, like, Jesus put them, the powers of evil in this world, the elemental forces of nature that came against what God was doing, whoever, whatever they are. Jesus made a spectacle of them, right, by dying on the cross, right? Just displayed like you lost, you're inferior, you don't know what you're doing, you don't have the power to take this place. Was what happened, right? And I forget where in the scripture, but it's in the book. When you break out of poverty in your life, when you break out of sickness, a cycle of dysfunction in your family, when you walk away from a dysfunctional relationship, when you demonstrate power, goodness, affection, generosity in a way that's reflective of the nature of God, you are communicating something to the universe, and you've been given a stance to be able to project that into existence. To be able to confess with your life, your choices, your actions, your words, whatever, what you believed, whom you were in line with, what you aligned yourself with, right? And so we were talking about in that last session, drawing a line in the sand and picking a side. We're taking a stand there, right? I will uphold compromise, deception, selfishness, bending the rules for my favor, my benefit. You could choose that side. Or I will not tolerate dysfunction and deviance from the nature of God and what he intended. I won't celebrate this. I won't abide it. I will oppose it. Either way, we're taking a stand, right? One is an upright standing. The other one is shady and dysfunctional. But either way, you're standing in something, right? And you're saying something to the world. That in and of itself is power. Is you being set up for success to be able to execute what you want in your life. You are not a slave. You are not a victim. You're empowered. You have a stance. You have a voice. You have a name. You've got a stance. You have the power to say something and make it a statement, to give something to the world, to push against forces or tides that would try to coerce something, and you can do something else. You have the power to do it. We've seen the world change. Like if you just look at human history, we've seen so many things change because somebody took a stand. Someone said no to something that was happening that shouldn't have been, or yes to something that wasn't happening that should have been. Or yes to something that was awesome that just didn't exist before. Thank God for Edison, right? Like we've got better lighting today because Thomas Edison didn't settle for a candle, for lamps. Like he was after something better. Thank God he believed in something more and he took a stand. What did his stand look like? 10,000 ways not to do it, right? He just kept going until finally he figured it out and changed the way we do life for the rest of humanity. He took a stand. That stance started in his heart, in the spirit. It started inside. He had to say yes to something there first. And then from that place, the path was unfolded to him, and he continued to follow it to the point where he discovered how to harness electricity to make light for us. Where we can stay up however long we want. He's ruined all of our sleeping schedules, right? He's given us power. How did Thomas Edison get there? And we've got so many other people in history we could look at who changed the way life is lived for people, who changed the quality of life, the standard of living, the possibilities, the way that we relate to each other because of the stances they took. Realize that your ability to take a stand on anything is powerful. It communicates something and it changes stuff in this world. You are not a passive observer. You're not here to survive this place. You are here to contribute, to make a mark, not to make a difference. You don't have to be, bothersome or obstinate. You're here to contribute and affect what we call normal. You've got the power to stand, okay? All right, moving right along. Body part number 4. Did it show up? Oh, sorry, this is further on the stance thing. So when we believe we can know something, that's when we can ask. So talking about Edison, for example, when he believed that there could be something different here with electricity or lighting or whatever, when he believed it was possible, that gave him the power to ask for the solution. And the ask wasn't happening in English. It happened in his heart intent. It happened in his pursuit. In his actions, he was asking for revelation through his testing, his trial and error, his experimentation, right? Again, we can apply this to so many examples. And so from that place, that conviction, that faith of possibility, this could happen. I think this is available. I think that we could have this. It gives us the power to ask for what we need to pull it into existence. We occupy our platform where our voice can be heard. So from that journey, from the things that come out of us, we then take up that space. And from that place, a narrative is told. A statement is made. A shift in the ripple of how things are going to play out. We affect it. Okay? All right, body part number 4. Authority. I don't know why I put it on your hands. It should have been your shoulders, but it just was running out of space at the top. Okay, this is Luke. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. This is Jesus just being crazy again, saying all this crazy stuff. I have given you power, authority, to overcome all the power of the enemy. And again, the New Testament is rampant with scripture, speaking of the authority that you've been given. You have authority in this world. By being a son or daughter of the king, being grafted into his family, that intrinsically comes with Authority, meaning the spiritual powers at work in this world have to obey what you decide. It's not a negotiation. It's not a coercing that we have to do. It is authoritative, meaning you don't need their permission to say or do whatever you do. You go with it, and then they have to adjust. The enemy has to make space for what you decided. This is true. A lot of believers just aren't taught this, don't understand it, and so they're tossed around or affected by what the enemy is doing. But at the end of the day, you are not subject to him. He is subject to you. Peter, the rock, right, that God is going to build his church, that Jesus was going to build the ecclesia. And from this place, the gates of hell would not prevail against her, right? We are the ones taking ground. We are the ones expanding the light. We are the ones infiltrating this place and establishing dominion, the kingdom, the government of our God, right? You have authority over any of that stuff. So it doesn't matter what kind of strategy or wiles the enemy has brought to your life. Let's say this is the first time you're ever hearing this. It doesn't matter. Whatever the enemy has convinced you of up to this point, you can change that. Like that. By simply disagreeing with that, the authority of that thing. The proof, the power that that thing has had in your life, you can disagree. And instead of just continuing to feed from that thing, you consider, what if something else is true? You open up yourself to a different possibility. What if instead of having cancer, the stripes of Jesus actually purchased your healing, and that could change today? What if instead of being in debt and running away from all the creditors and constantly struggling for financial provision, and even if that was your whole life and even your parents and whoever else, maybe that was normal for you, that could change today. Meaning you open up in your consideration box an openness to the possibility of something different than what you've known up to this point. Behold, he makes all things new. His mercies are new every morning. You are not stuck this way. You have the authority to change whatever you want. You don't have to be a certain thing. You're not stuck under some kind of undesirable outcome. It can change. And I'd like to propose the reason the undesirable outcome is there in the first place is because you became convinced of a lesser understanding. You got told something was true. You got convinced for whatever reason, and so you continue to perpetuate the experience of it because of what you've believed, what you've accepted. Well, no, Mike, it can't be that simple. Except for it is. It absolutely is. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. When Jesus says, and he says this a lot, all things are possible for him who believes. With God, all things are possible. It's not a fluffy Hallmark statement. He's legitimately telling you, you can change anything. You can do, have, be anything. And the more aware we are of our intimacy with the Lord, the clearer it becomes what he's already doing. And our desires stop going outside of what he's designed, and they start finding home and grounding in what he has already set into motion. And that becomes a revelation to us that that's what we've wanted this whole time. I want to be that person. I want to do that thing. I want to have that. I want to give that. I want to demonstrate that. I want to change that. It's found in what he's already put into motion in our being. His plans for us are for prosperity, for us not to be harmed, but to have a future and have hope, right? That we would be living abundant life, that our joy would be overflowing. So from this place, you guys, you are not subject to any power of this world. You have been set above all of it. For you died and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. Christ in you, the hope of glory. You are not subject to this world. And I don't want to use cliche phrases and statements because I want to lose you guys. The reality is you have authority and you can change what you want. You get to say no, you get to say yes, however you'd like. And because you did, the authority you carry makes it so. Okay. Number 5, royalty. I put it on the head because that's where a crown would go, right? 1 Peter 2:9, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. You carry royalty. We have a question? Okay, let's do it now. Let's do that question now.
Mel Gonzalez is asking.
Are they hearing you? No? Oh, so I should say it? Yeah. Mel is asking.
Why did God change the name of some disciples?
Why did God change the name of some disciples? Mel, my first answer is I don't know. My other answer is going to be Jesus was speaking to the identity of what he was instilling in them. Our parents can give us names that don't belong to us, right? That's possible. And sometimes I'd like to propose God still does that today. Sometimes God changes people's names. Sometimes the name they were given was Spirit-led from the get-go, right? That was their name. Sometimes the Lord intervenes and changes it. I'd like to propose sometimes he'll change a name because of how the name affects the person's future, because of how it plays out in what they demonstrate in their nature and what they have been programmed by to believe based on what that name inherently possesses. So Peter was Cephas, changed it to Peter, which means rock, right? Because of what Peter was going to become. Jesus is prophetically declaring over this man, you are going to be the foundation upon which I'm going to change the world. And if you guys notice this about God, he's super unique and creative and so predictable. I mean that with all due respect. He's not predictable except for when he is. And here's the deal. God constantly is finding a new person in the story to make the most important person in the story. He goes out of his way to continue to find new people to make prominent members of the experience. We see Abraham, we see Moses, we see David, we see Bathsheba, we see Rahab, we see Jesus, we see these characters whom bring whatever, right? Solomon, the wisest in the world. Moses, the humblest in all the world. Noah, the most righteous in all the world, because everyone else was only evil all the time constantly. Right? He didn't have a lot of competition. Sorry, I'm just kidding. God is consistently looking for people to raise up and make them special. This is a king who's looking to crown others, who wants to give his glory away, who wants to cause other people to be prominent members of the story. This is the king we serve. This is his nature. So when he chooses Cephas and makes him Peter, he's saying, you will be important. I'm going to make you prominent here. I'm going to make you foundational. I'm going to give you a seat in the house of glory. Why? Because Peter proved something? Because he earned it from God? Because he twisted his arm? Because he convinced him of something? No. Because God is looking to share his glory. We have a question. Hopefully I've answered that question, Mel. I'm going to give you these thoughts. I don't know why, but I think it's because of this attribute of God. He wants to bring people into stuff, and he speaks to their name sometimes to incorporate how they're going to be participating in it. What's the other question?
Yeah, Charlie Hicks says,
Charlie Hicks says,
I'm going to add a word here. Is what we sometimes say merely a description?
is what we sometimes say merely a description?
I have been incredibly tired at times.
I have been incredibly tired at times.
If I say I'm tired, aren't I just describing what's happening?
If I say I'm tired, aren't I just describing what's happening in the moment physically? Right? Yeah, well, here's the deal. Is it Charlie? Charlie, listen, I'm your friend. Okay, I'm not interested in fighting. I'm not disagreeing with your experience or where you're coming from, but I'm going to say this. And listen, I get it. Like, I've confessed that I've been tired, right? I get it. So I know what you're saying. I'm not saying that it's wrong or bad, but here's the deal. So it is popular in human practice to be informed of what's true by what we experience. We think that's a definition or a litmus test for reality. That's not true. What you feel, what you think, what you want, those are not indications of reality. They're indications of how your soul is interpreting reality, right? But your soul is subject to the spirit. So here's the deal. Maybe you do feel tired. Maybe you're physically or emotionally or mentally exhausted. Maybe that's true. My question to you, Charlie, would be, and not just Charlie, I think you're reflecting a question that a lot of us would wonder, do you want to be tired? I think this is really what this boils down to. And this doesn't click overnight. It's something you get to train your being to reorient. But the question would actually boil down to, do you want to be tired? Not are you? Because here's the deal. You feeling fatigue in your body or feeling tiredness isn't a definition of what's actually happening to you. It's how your body's interpreting experiences, right? You can conclude that you're tired, and you can declare that with your mouth, and you can bind yourself to that experience with your confession. You can. I'm asking, do you want that? And some of us actually do. Some of us want to be tired. Why? Because it's easier. I'd rather just give in to the sensation or the feeling than change it. So I'm going to confess I'm tired. I'm going to go take a nap. I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to not try. I'm going to not participate. I'm just going to lay here. Whatever. We agree with it. We bind ourselves to it so it justifies the course of action that comes after. It gives us permission to walk that out without a seared conscience, right? So legitimately, you have permission to be tired. If that's what you want, that's okay, and you can choose it. But your experience of tiredness is not a definition of reality. I would like to propose you don't have to be. Does that mean you can just change your tiredness? I believe all things are possible. I believe you're not subject to that. So if you wanted to, you could. I think the reason most of us don't experience that is because we don't want it enough. We want the tired thing. Of course, we don't want to be poor, but sometimes it's easier to be poor than to steward resources. Sometimes it's easier to be broke than to have to work to steward and sustain wealth or prosperity or blessing. Seriously, it is easier to do that. One of my experiences when it comes to like growing in success and whatever is you get more and more problems to deal with. And the thing is, like, are they problems or are they just continued opportunity to exercise your authority and dominion, right? And I'm not saying it's a perspective shift. I'm saying legitimately, the more God gives you, the more you're going to have to steward. You don't become more and more careless with the increase that comes with the Lord. You become more and more careful, not cautious or fearful, but mindful and intentional with what's handed to you, okay? So anyway, this can go in all kinds of directions. At the end of the day, we're like, well, I don't want to be tired, except for maybe you do. Because underneath this, you know that if you just are tired, then you have an excuse to not have to keep going. You get to give up or crash or rest or whatever, right? I'm not proposing that the answer to this is that you just never admit that you're tired. And you just go hard and burn yourself out and drive yourself on the ground. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is when we experience a sensation like, oh, I'm tired, I'm sick, I'm scared, I'm whatever, that's a momentary experience, but to confess that I am this thing, there's a binding to it. You might feel the temptation to be afraid. If you misinterpret the temptation as an actual experience, or if you've already just given over to it, and then you're like, I'm scared, you're only going to perpetuate the fear in your life. I'm not saying pretend it's not happening. I'm saying before it gets here, address it earlier. Do you have to be afraid? Is being afraid appropriate here? Can you change the fear? And I would make that decision before my mouth participates. And this is something that you train, that you learn how to like discipline your tongue, right? Charlie, am I answering your question? Do you want to poke at it? Okay. By the way, what time am I supposed to end this session? 30? Sorry, I should have looked. I didn't. Oh, got it. Okay. Okay, body part number 6. You are an heir. Okay. As in someone who inherits something, right? Romans 8. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God, and co-heirs with Christ. If we're children of God, that means automatically we are now heirs or inheritors of his legacy, right? Of what he's giving to us, his kingdom, his authority, his house, his stuff. We get all of it. It's ours now, right? So that heirness about you means that you are entitled. Yeah, usually that word is negative, but in this context, it is not. You are entitled to him, to his things. God is so binding himself to us in this relationship. He's continuously looking for opportunities to bind himself to us, to connect, to be stuck by us. We see religion coming into this relationship and it's looking for ways to discredit the beloved, ways to disqualify us, ways to accentuate our distinction, our separateness, right? That we don't belong, we're different. When I encountered Jesus for the first time and I'm weeping, I'm like, I shouldn't be here. I don't think I said this, but I wanted to die. Like I didn't want to be in the room because I was making this whole equation gross or dirty. I was muddying up the place and I didn't want to be there. But that was because of what I had been convinced of from my upbringing that I'm filthy, I'm nasty, I'm unworthy, blah, 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 blah. God was never saying that to me. The church was, like religion was, right? Religion is constantly looking for ways to make us different from God, to continue to accentuate and draw attention to the difference, the gap, the separateness, right? Thank you. Okay. God is constantly doing the other thing. Jesus changed everything, and now he's constantly blurring the lines. Now God is constantly finding ways to identify with us, ways to be one with us, ways for him to get stuck with us. He wants to be stuck. Those of you guys who have fallen in love, you've experienced this dynamic in you where you want to be bound by this person. You want to be stuck to them. Not inhibited or held back, but fused, right? Connected. And it's not even rational. It doesn't make sense. You can't explain to people why you should want this, but it's there. It's commanding and powerful, right? You just want them in the same room. You just want to be around them. You don't even need to talk to them. You just want them there, right? Why? It's this compelling, I want to be around you. It's a romantic, affectionate thing. It's not a logical thing. That is his bent toward us. He's not just filling out a will or a prenup, he's not just filling out some kind of contract to just make sure the matters are in order. He's romantically invested and wants to be bound. Hence, when a wife takes on her husband's name, it's this demonstration to society, I want to be identified with this person. We're of the same family. We're finding all the ways for us to be together rather than be distinguished, right? Two people who are actually in love with each other are constantly looking for ways to be identified with each other. They're not looking for ways to be separate. It's when things start going wrong that we start accentuating our differences. Oh yeah, no, that's my husband. Oh yeah, no, that's my wife. She's like that. Not me. The thing that's coming up to separate us is where love has not touched it, right? That's where we want to be different, other than, and realize there's nothing like that happening in God. He wants to be the same with us. It's weird. It's bizarre. It's romantic. It's hot. It's weird. It's not sexual, but it is romantic, okay? It's this yeah. Anyway, so the heir that you are is a further expression of his desire to be one with you, for you to partake in what he has, what he's done, what he's doing, what he'll continue to do, for you to have your name on it too. It's offensive, and it is not popular in religion. The enemy, it's his job to accuse us. He's trying to condemn us. He's trying to implicate us, expose us, trip us up, disqualify us, make us inadequate in our own minds. That's what the enemy is doing. And if you find yourself doing that, you're playing for the wrong team. The Holy Spirit is not trying to point out to people how they're not good enough. He's trying to show them how they belong, that he wants them, right? So being an heir means you are entitled to all of what God has, all of who he is. And it's not out of you can have it. It's out of I want you to have this. He wants us to have it more than he wants himself to have it. You know what I mean? That's the deal. That's the nature of his engagement in this relationship. And so when we bear the term, or the title, if you will, heir, right, it comes with entitlement, with a boldness. So we get to boldly come before him, before the throne of grace, right? We're not timid, we're not shy, we're not tentative, we're not cautious, not maybe. We boldly get to come before Mr. Holy, Mr. Perfect, the guy who made me want to die. We get to come before him boldly. And dare I say, I'm going to say this I'm not trying to be offensive, but we get to demand intimacy with him. We get to demand attention, demand connection, demand response. Not out of, you owe this to me, give this to me, blah, blah, but out of an affectionate, you have bound yourself to me. We are together. We're in this. I want you. And it's coming from love. When it's coming from your brain, that's something else completely, and I'm not talking about that. When it's coming from your heart, when it's coming from love, he has limited himself to you in that way. He owes you himself because of his own oath, because of his own covenant. He is bound. So when you bear the title heir, that should affect what you read in that book, how you wake up in the morning, what you experience in your life, what comes out of your mouth. A lot of us demonstrate sin and depravity because we are ignorant of what happened to us. We simply don't understand. We don't get it. And so out of our depravity, we are foul and coarse and careless or whatever. Okay, there's questions. Let's pause. Go ahead.
Charlie wants to follow up.
Okay, great. Charlie's follow-up.
I met a woman at a seminar of a non-Christian thing, sounds like.
I met a woman at a seminar, which was a non-Christian event.
And you might not have seen this in the news. They had a confidence experience where the participants were told they might feel like they were dying, but they weren't.
You might not have seen this in the news. The participants were told they might have the experience of dying, but they weren't dying.
Yeah, she died along with two others. I understand that she probably wasn't saved, but
She died along with two others. I understand she probably wasn't saved, but ellipses. Okay, Charlie. I don't know, man. I don't know what to say to that. I don't know. I don't think I understand the scenario. Do you understand the scenario, Marcus?
no, I think
So they had people imagine they were dying?
it's like the thing where it's like, oh, if I say I'm tired, aren't I like just describing what that is? I think he's saying like they were saying like, oh, it might feel like dying, and then they actually die.
You're declaring over yourself death.
Is there a correlation between that?
The power of life and death is in the tongue, right? That's true. So what you cast your lot with your voice, excuse me, is going to produce a result one way or the other. Now, this sounds like an extreme scenario, and I can't speak to the variables there. And I don't want to support a superstitious fear in this area where like, oh God, I can't say that. Well, like just kind of policing our words. It's not like that. It's what is the word coming from? Where is the confession coming from? Am I expressing tiredness because of my lethargy and lack of stewardship in my own life? Because of my fear? Because of my complacency? Or is my confession coming from a recognition of where I'm actually sourced in, and it's demonstrating what I believe, right? And so we can pay attention to what's coming out of our mouths to tell us what we're connected to. And we don't want to be superstitious about this. We want to be mindful and pay attention and understand that words are seed and they get planted. They don't always come to fruition right away. Sometimes there's a natural cycle for what gets planted. So we want to pay attention to what kind of seed is coming out of us. And if we don't like the seed, we don't like what's going to come out of the harvest, then we just change the seed. We don't change the word, we change the belief. And when the belief changes, the word will change. Yeah.
Some follow-ups.
Okay.
He said this was a sweat lodge experience, and they were told they might think they were dying.
A sweat lodge experience. They were told they might think they're dying, but they're not dying, but they did die. Okay. Yeah, so, dude, I don't know. I guess they probably dehydrated and died. I mean, there's the natural part of this, too, like that will have an effect. Like, I think this is kind of separate from what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Catherine Harold says, how is the best way to communicate what we decide to the spirit realm?
How is the best way to communicate what?
How is the best way to communicate what we decide to the spirit realm?
What is the best way for us to communicate what we decide to the spirit realm?
Is it solely through our words, or
Is it solely through our words, or are there other ways?
through our decision?
Like through our decision?
How do we take the limits off our perception of reality if they are informed by our experience?
How do we take the limits off our perception of reality if they're informed by our experience? Yeah, so it's going to be a rewriting of how we perceive reality, right? How we perceive life. We don't want to conform to the pattern of this world, which is react to circumstance, right? The pattern of this world is, hey, if you're cold, if your bank account is empty, you're poor. If you feel like symptoms of sickness in your body, you're sick. If no one talks to you, you're unloved and rejected, right? We perceive an experience and then thus conclude a statement about truth, which is not accurate, right? That's how most people live, and we're reactionary to our experiences, and that's a pretty, I'm gonna say barbaric approach to life. But being a spirit-filled, born-again believer, you are actually here to happen to your experiences, not the other way around. So you might have your experience telling you something, a proposal like, hey, you might want to feel like this. Hey, just so you know, like you're experiencing this thing. That's something to pay attention to. It's not something to define you. Something to pay attention to, right? It's not necessarily an indication of what's real. So the two questions, Catherine, the first one, yes, there are many ways to demonstrate what we're choosing or declaring. There are many ways to communicate what we've chosen in the spirit to the universe. Our words is one of them. It's probably a primary way. It's not the only way. But yeah, your choices, your actions, your relationships, your lifestyle, your habits, your pattern, these are all things that you're communicating to the universe of what you've aligned with. Which they all grow to become structures in and of themselves. The first time you choose to tip from generosity versus social guilt, right? When it's coming from generosity, sincerely, that's a moment where you're communicating to the universe, right? But when you start tapping into that pathway, and every time you tip, you're tapping into that space, you actually build a pathway of generosity in your life, and your life in a pattern is communicating to the universe, I agree with generosity. I'm generous because my Father is generous, and I will give like he does, right? And so that pattern becomes a confession to the world, and you didn't say a word, right? So it's how you spent your money or whatever. It's that in all of the things. In the patterns and choices we make as well, they demonstrate to the world what we're communicating in the spirit. And the other question was, how do we change? How do we take the limits off our perception of reality if they're what? If they're informed by experience. So it means that our experiences stop being informed by, our experiences stop defining what's true for us, and instead, the Word of God. I don't mean the Bible. It includes the Bible. I mean what God says starts defining for us what is true. So if you have an experience that I'm broke, and God did not declare that you're broke, you do not get to say that you're broke. Only we do, which means we cast our lot with something other than God. Did he say you're poor? No. If he didn't, then it is not appropriate for a son or a daughter to confess poor in their life, as an example, right? Did he say that you are unlovely? No. Then it is inappropriate for you to confess that these people, or that you, aren't lovely in whatever way. Did he say that you're weak, that you suck, that you're a victim? If not, then you do not get to, it is inappropriate for you to confess that you're weak, or that you're a victim, or that you're powerless. It is unacceptable in the life of a believer. And so when we come to life from that framework, from that standpoint, we then start imposing that stance on our experiences, and our experience changes. The experience might not change right away, but as we start to allow our minds to be renewed to truth, and we stop just giving into what's easier. Oh, it's easier just to believe I'm a victim than to embrace power. It's easier to believe I'm broke than to embrace stewardship. It's easier to believe that I'm rejected than to embrace the vulnerability of actually moving towards someone in relationship, right? We then start learning from that place how to say yes to the sovereign realm, yes to the kingdom, yes to the heart of God. And from that, our experiences will reflect what we've said yes to. So you realize that your experiences come in cycles, like farming cycles. If you're experiencing a ton of rejection right now, it's probably because you've sown a lot of rejection, belief, and agreement, right? And if you're experiencing that right now, recognize it's not an indication of what's true about you, it's an indication of what you've believed up to this point. So you get to change. Okay, I renounce this rejection thing. I'm sorry for having said yes in the beginning or to begin with. That was a mistake. Clearly, I've eaten it. Oops. I'm going to change that. The truth is, I'm loved. I'm perfectly accepted. People like me. And that's not coming from my experience. It's coming from what I know to be true because of who my dad is and what he said about me. Because of who I am, people are naturally going to like me. You guys, by the way, that's true. Everyone in this room, everyone watching this, people like you. That's true. Your experience might tell you otherwise, but your experience is a reflection of you saying yes to something other than who you are. You've been giving them something else. And I'd encourage you, just change what you're giving them, and guess what? You'll find a manifestation that people actually do like you. Okay, we got to move on. I've got 2 more points, guys, and we've got 6 minutes. All right, next. Dude, it is hot in here. Okay, next we've got purity. Every one of us has purity, okay? 1 John 3, all who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. Purity is a commentary of what's coming up from inside of us, and that might not actually be our experience right away, but the reality is that is the intent for you, and that is what you are made out of. You are a pure being. You are clean. You have been, your nasty self has been buried. Like that funeral happened, it's gone. What's left is pure, okay? And you have been handed a clean slate. And you've been handed a clean slate that is undirtyable. It's a word. It's now a word. Your clean slate, it cannot be tarnished because it's not your slate. God didn't clean your slate and then hand it to you and let you do whatever you want with it. He cleaned your slate by destroying it and giving you his slate. When you're born again, you guys, your slate is Jesus's. Okay? And so that thing can't be ruined. And you're running around, no matter what your sexual activity has been, no matter how you've involved yourself in whatever thing, purity is yours because it's his. Okay? And from that place, you get to demonstrate that in the life you're living. You get to show the world what it's like, not because you're trying to, but because it's an indication of what you're already connected to. Okay? Every single one of us has been given purity. It's not something we're trying to attain. It's something that's already true about us. When we accept that, embrace it, it will manifest in our experiences, in our choices, in our behavior. Okay? And then lastly, there's a question? Hit me. Go ahead.
Rachel Wheeler says, so how do you communicate and process those feelings or experiences in the moment without agreeing with the statement? For instance, what should you say if your bank account currently reads low, but you don't want to say I'm broke?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. How do you communicate and process those feelings or experiences in the moment without agreeing with the statement? Oh. Yeah. Keep going. For instance, what should you say if your bank account currently reads low, but you don't want to say I'm broke? How do you process this? I think that's the question, right? Yeah, so keep in mind, you guys, your emotions are a reflection of your judgment. Okay, you don't have an emotion that came void of a judgment. You don't know how to, your being doesn't know how to feel without a framework, right? So a judgment being met or not met is going to produce an emotional response. So if there's a desire for love and then it happens, you're going to experience euphoria, excitement, joy, right? That emotion is coming from a judgment that got met. If you're expecting for someone to cover or protect somebody and then they don't and that person gets devastated, you get angry, right? Because your judgment was violated. That shouldn't have happened. This person should have been protected and they weren't, and so I'm mad. The emotion is coming from a judgment, right? And so if your bank account is reflecting low, you don't have a ton of money, you're going to have an emotional response. Ugh, I don't want to be broke. I want money, right? And I don't have it. So I don't like this experience. You want to admit you're dissatisfied. This is unpleasant for you. Yes, acknowledge the emotion, but don't let the emotional experience graduate to the point where you are now making a statement about reality, an establishment about your experience. Like, oh, I'm broke. Realize this statement, I'm broke, is not a commentary on a moment. It is a label. It is an identity statement. By saying I'm broke, I'm saying I'm a target of lack. I'm inviting lack into my life, not just from this moment, but to keep coming by it's not the confession, it's the belief that comes out in the form of words. It's not just the words, you guys. I'm saying it's the word that's coming from what's been believed, what's been accepted. Saying I'm broke means I'm accepting lack as a standard in my life, and that's not appropriate. So, how we process that is simply admitting, like, oh my gosh, I'm out of money and that freaks me out. I'm bothered by this. I don't want this to be my experience. I'm not supposed to be experiencing lack. Something's off. I'm going to change this. That's an appropriate response. Not, I'm broke, you guys. No, I can't afford that. You know what I mean? Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, the last body part. Freedom. Every one of you has been given freedom, okay? And you guys, listen, this is not a complete list. There are lots of things about your anatomy. I'm just trying to give us a starting point. That's true for everybody. So when you experience a deviation from any of these plumb lines, you get to recognize it's already a false narrative, okay? Galatians 5, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Every single one of us has been liberated because of Jesus. Freedom is now your normal, and anything that is impinging on your freedom is a violation of what is yours. Now, how does a free person who's actually free react to someone or something trying to infringe on their freedom? They don't say yes to it. They don't approve of it. I don't know if they lash out and react and like punish or retaliate, but they definitely don't celebrate the impingement, right? Excuse me. So the freedom you've been given is something that's precious and important and something you've been empowered to get to walk out and experience and benefit from. And that's normal. It's your plumb line. It's what every one of us is supposed to be experiencing. Any kind of deviation from that is where the devourer has come in. Where we've said yes to something other than what God intended, other than what he has for us. Here's the deal. No one can take your freedom away. You can abdicate your freedom if you'd like. You can say yes to something else that occupies where freedom is supposed to be running around in your life. But nobody outside of you can take that from you. It's going to be something that happens on the inside. You abdicate freedom from within. And obviously we don't want to do that. You've been set up for absolute success. You have royalty. You have a voice. You are an heir. You have purity. You have a stance. You have authority. You have a name. You have freedom. This is all true. And we, again, like I said, we keep going. You guys, every one of us has these intrinsically built into our person. We already come stock full of this stuff into this world, okay? Whatever gets in the way of any of these things is not truth, it's violation, and it is meant to be addressed, okay? So understand, this is who you are, this is where your experience is supposed to be coming from, and this should inform how you experience the life you're living. Whatever deviates doesn't belong. Govern accordingly. Okay, we gotta wrap this session up. Becca, come on up. Yeah.